Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, in 2 days from today, we have one of the most dangerous holidays of the year, especially for people who struggle with sugar addiction and their weight. I'm talking about Halloween. Well, my guest today is going to give us some simple tips on how we can crush those sugar cravings and not cave to the crave on Halloween. You know, it's been almost 20 years since I've been free of refined sugar. My guest almost double that. So it can be done. Please welcome back to the show, Sara Levite. You beat me, girl.
Well, it's one day at a time, and then 1 year at a time, and then before you know it, it's a couple of decades. And it's when I look at sugar products now, it really looks like rat poison. It's not anything that I recognize as being something that I would be interested in engaging in. So if I can give hope to your listeners that I promise you it gets easier and it's so worth it to just omit whenever you have an addiction, you need to omit the substance that you're addicted to from your life. And obviously with food and sugar, it's a little bit more complicated than something like cigarettes or alcohol, but it's the same concept. Get it out so your body can assimilate, a new way of living.
Yeah, it's funny already. So Esther's saying, well, what do we pass out on Halloween? I typed in the chat, don't pass anything out. Turn the lights on, go to the movies.
I have some ideas. I mean, because, if you go to the movies and you turn off the lights, you always run the risk of eggs getting thrown at your house. So what I would suggest or recommend doing is either little boxes of raisins or glow sticks or something that you feel is, it will be enjoyable, but it also feels as though it's easy just to hand out. It is difficult, but I believe that there are possibilities, stickers, pencils, anything, because kids just like to get stuff.
Right. How about handing out copies of The Pleasure Trap?
Oh, there you go. To the parents.
Yeah, exactly.
I think so too. There should be a children's version of The Pleasure Trap.
Yeah, you have just given me a great idea. And my guest tomorrow is Dr. Ellen Goldhammer, and I'm going to suggest that.
I mean, absolutely, right? Have it cartoonish, but interesting, and language that kids can appreciate and enjoy. I think it would be a real act of service to the society that we live in.
Yeah, let's get that done. So Stacy, who's watching live, says she's been off sugar for 5 weeks. So this is perfect coming into Halloween and the holidays. And congratulations, Stacy. We know it's not easy, but we also know it can be done. And Bridget likes your glow stick idea.
Thank you. And the other thing is that if somebody feels compelled to have candy to hand out to the children, there are ways of getting rid of the candy right away afterward instead of having it hang around your house, because that's just asking for temptation. And it's not really fair if you feel like you have a sugar addiction. It's not really fair for you to ask yourself to be, able to contend with it looking at you in the face that way. You can either give it away to somebody else. Other things that people have done is they may, this may seem extreme, but some people, they'll spray their candy with hairspray so that they are not tempted to open it up and eat it. I like the idea of giving it away or throwing it away because I think it's crap anyway. But there's no reason why people need to have it lingering in their house. If you live with people and they are saying, I really don't want to throw this away, I want to enjoy it, fine. They can stash it someplace where you'll never see it.
Yeah, well, my vote is not to get it, not to even buy it at all, because it's just too tempting for most people,
It is tempting for most people. And I think that any way that you can redirect Halloween away from candy towards celebrating children in a way that's, healthy and doable is something that's worth investigating.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm so excited you've prepared a presentation for us today.
I have. And what I wanted to do, I'm going to be sharing the screen shortly, but what I want to do is I'm going to be giving you multiple tips. And throughout my presentation, feel free to interrupt me at any time if you want to ask questions, because I want people to feel as though I'm accessible to them if they have a spontaneous question.
Okay.
I'm going to share the screen. And I'm going to ask you to tell me if you can see it okay.
It's perfect.
Okay. So, and the other thing is that if for some reason throughout the slideshow, if somebody finds that any of the words are covered up, they can just go up to the view and click on side by side so that they can have access to the full text that's on there. But most of your viewers are probably very well versed in this. So Candy Crush, simple tips for overcoming sugar addiction. Again, my name is Sara Levite. I am a psychotherapist. I've been in private practice for over 30 years, and I also am a wellness coach. Okay, why is this so hard? The problem is food, but you think it's you. Weight shaming and a youth-obsessed culture is what we live in. Food is celebratory and legal. So it hits all of the marks in terms of it being on that precipice between fun and harmless and benign to being something that can be really literally lethal for some people if they are susceptible to that addiction. We carry many childhood memories connected to food. We all have that. Certain smells, certain textures harken back to our childhood. And a lot of times those are very comforting. And those comforting memories can compel us to want to recreate them. And one way to recreate our childhood, at least in the positive ways, is through food. Our tolerance to sugar increases. And so withdrawal can make us feel worse. These are some of the many reasons why it's so hard. Everybody's got their own story and their own journey, but I'm here to try to inspire people to understand that if I can do it, you can do it. Okay, holiday hell. You alluded to this a little bit. As far as I'm concerned, it seems like every month has a holiday involving food. And the supermarkets have really engaged in this kind of marketing ploy where they put things out the day after the previous holiday ends. And so you're constantly being exposed to different themes, and they all look like they're colorful and exciting. I mean, I remember, I think it's like right after New Year's Eve, they start putting out Valentine's candy. And so this is just part of what we are exposed to on a regular basis. So it's not just the holidays where, you know, it's Christmas and Thanksgiving, although Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, those are big food holidays. But there always seems to be something or another, whether it's Easter and all the candy, or whether it's Valentine's Day, Halloween, obviously. So grocery stores market to us 365 days a year, and all of us need to go to the grocery store. So we're constantly being exposed to that marketing in ways that are obvious and not so obvious. And that's another important thing. People are being marketed to in ways that are so subconscious, and it impacts your hunger cues and all of that. So holiday hell. I'm saying that obviously we all have joyous memories around the holidays, and we can create traditions that are not hellish. We can pivot away from any unhealthy food. I mean, you're a testament to this, and surround ourselves with food that's healthy and celebratory that way. But it requires sometimes swimming upstream against what the norm is in our society. I like to talk to people about a holistic approach to trying to recover from sugar addiction. And this includes physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional. And I'm going to break it down a little bit so that I can be more specific. The physical component of recovery involves the food, your body, and your environment. For example, it's helpful to identify and write down what your trigger foods are. Now, some people that I've had do this, they come up with a list of 10 things. Some people come up with a list of 150 things. It's very subjective what it is that triggers somebody. But we all know what it is that when we start to put it in our mouth, or even when we think about it, we start to fantasize, we start to salivate, we start to get a little bit too excited. And those are all of the foods that I recommend people make a list around so that they can start to have a framework from which to begin this recovery process. Remove these foods from your environment And I hear you emphasizing this all the time, Chef AJ, that if it's in your house, it's in your mouth, and that it's important to remove these things. Now, obviously, this is complicated if you don't live alone, and we can get onto that. I'll be talking about that a little bit as we go forward. But removing it from your environment is not only a gift to you, but it's also probably going to increase the likelihood that you'll be successful in trying to break this addiction. Begin reading ingredient labels. Now, I say this with great intention because so many people are fixated on the nutrition labels that are on their food that they overlook the ingredient labels. And I love to understand what the heck is in my food. And if it's got a gazillion ingredients, then I know that it's something that I don't want to be putting in my body. So begin reading them and avoid items where sugar is within the first 4 ingredients. And there's something like 60 different words for sugar. So that can be deceiving too. Try to acquaint yourself with some of the other terms that are used that may confuse you and you may not realize are actually sugar-based. Try to stay on an eating schedule that prevents you from getting over hungry between meals. Now, this can differ from person to person, so pay attention to your physical hunger cues. And those would include your stomach growling, getting lightheaded, becoming very preoccupied with food. And my goal in working with clients is to try to get them to be more connected to their body and the cues that they're getting from within so that they'll be less vulnerable around the external cues, which we have less control over. Be sure to have healthy, non-triggering food with you whenever you are away from home for a meal. Now, I've been doing this for 33 years, so there's a learning curve. It's important for you to have grace and compassion with yourself around this, that you got to experiment a little bit. If you are invited to somebody's house for a meal, I don't see any shame in asking them what they're serving. It's oftentimes etiquette to ask if you can bring something. So why not be sure to bring something that you would enjoy? And then that way you're safe. And that way you don't have to worry and obsess about the food. You can focus more on the company and the friendship and the environment that you're in instead of being nervous about if you'll get the food that you need or not. So inquire about what's being served. And then, of course, I know your viewers know this, but if you're going to a restaurant, check out the menu before you go so that you have a plan in your mind before you even step into the restaurant. Develop an exercise plan that you will enjoy as opposed to one that you think you should do. All of us have embarked on exercise plans that we thought, oh, everybody's doing this. This is like the new thing. I should do this. Oh, that looks fun over there, what they're doing. But we have to be honest with ourselves. Like, I know that for me, I'm not into running. I don't like running. It hurts everything. And I'm just not interested. But I love to bicycle. And so that's the exercise that I do. And some people, they like to go to the gym. And some people loathe the gym. They would much rather exercise outdoors or something. So do a deeper dive and ask yourself, what's my truth? What is it that I find I enjoy in terms of moving my body? Assess your relationship to your bathroom scale. Is it working for you? So there's lots of views on this. Some people feel that they get more anxious if they don't periodically check what their weight is. But that's the interesting word right there. Periodic. Is that once a day? Is it once a week? Is it once a month? And so when I start working with clients that are trying to embark on this journey, I ask them without judgment, how often do you step on the scale? My goal is, if they insist on stepping on the scale, my goal would be to get them to doing it once a month, first thing in the morning before they eat anything, with clothes on. I mean, with no clothes on, because every scale is different. So if you start hopping around, I'm going to go on the scale at the gym. I'm going to go on the scale at the doctor's office. I'm going to go on the scale at my friend's house. it can really, really wreak havoc with your mind because scales are all different. So the more you can stick with continuity, the better. Personally, I don't have a scale. I don't think about how much I weigh because my weight has been the same for about 33 years. When I first started to eliminate sugar from my meal plan, I was 40 pounds heavier. And I'm only 5'3", so 40 pounds more on me is really significant. I mean, I was definitely large and I wore a lot of fluffy, overflowing clothes so that I could hide my body. And I did have a scale then, and it didn't work. It didn't help me. There are some people that for medical reasons, they have to maintain an awareness of their scale. And I understand that. But be careful about and be truthful with yourself about if this is more of a compulsion. And if it really raises your anxiety and you put too much weight, no pun intended, on the number. Pay attention to the locations that trigger you. So this may seem like an odd thing, but I know that for me, when I was first converting to this other way of eating, there were certain fast food restaurants, bakeries, those kinds of things that were my haunting grounds that I would, retreat to and binge and, buy a bunch of food and eat it in my car. And so for a while, I took I tried to avoid passing them so that I wouldn't get triggered. It's just the association between the memory and the location that sometimes can get your salivation going. Develop a list of alternative behaviors for when you're not physically hungry. Now, I've done some presentations before about the difference between emotional hunger and physical hunger. And there's information on my website that you can access if you want more about that. But in short, what I'm trying to get you to do here is I'm trying to get you to be prepared with ideas of what do I do when I'm feeling squirrely? What do I do when I find myself, an hour after eating a meal, kind of poking around the kitchen, looking and seeing what's there? That suggests that there's some kind of emotional hunger going on as opposed to physical. So if you, when you are in a good place, when you are feeling peaceful and calm, when you are satiated, if you start to develop a list of what are some things I can do when basically I need to distract myself, and it can have a few things on it. It can be the names of people that you want to call. It can be hobbies. It can be locations that you find peaceful to go to, whether they be in your house or whether they be out in nature. But have that list available so that the minute you start to feel like, I wonder what's in the kitchen, be honest with yourself, look at the list and try an alternate behavior. Spiritual component. Develop a deeper relationship with your higher self. And I purposely use that language because some people, they attach spirituality and religion to one another. Personally, I don't. I feel that spirituality is separate from religion. I know that it is for me. And so develop a deeper relationship with what it is that that resonates with you around your higher self. For me, when I think of my higher self, I think of the part of me that is more peaceful, more calm, more loving toward myself and others. And a lot of the activities that I engage in on a routine basis are done with the intention of trying to get to that calm, peaceful place. So for me, it happens to be yoga, and it happens to be being out in nature. Live life in accordance with your personal value system. Now, again, this is a deeper dive and maybe more than some people want to take on. But what it does is it really gets you connected to what's my truth? Who the heck am I? What matters to me? Rather than just going along to get along and doing the same old, whether it be partying and you don't want to be doing that, overeating and you don't want to be doing that. It's just really doing an assessment of yourself. Are you living in accordance with your personal value system? When I was driving down streets, one-way streets the wrong way so that I could get to my food more quickly, that was not my higher self. And that wasn't living in accordance to my personal value system. That was my addiction making me friggin' insane, doing insane things. Daily, read something spiritual that leaves you feeling positive and hopeful. It doesn't need to be 2 chapters of a book. It can be a meditation, a line of affirmation. It can be a very, very brief sentence. It can be something that you post, up on your refrigerator to reflect on over the day. But something that you feel is another way of reminding yourself that it's not all about the fear, and it's more about what do I find peaceful and calm. Spend more time with people who are like-minded thinkers and seekers. This could be people who are fellow vegans. It could be people who are, in your community. It could be family members, but people who you feel inspire you to think a little bit more on a spiritual level. And begin a meditation practice. And this can look different from person to person. Some people feel like they need, to do it a certain amount of time. Other people may prefer doing listening to a guided meditation. So there are lots of flavors, lots of varieties, and just consider doing something. To me, meditation is about really remembering to take deep breaths. And it doesn't have to be something that's long. It's more of like, okay, how do I pause? How do I push the pause button? Because we are much more capable of making changes, behavioral changes in our life when we're in a place of peace and calm. Look around you and take note of 3 things you find beautiful in your environment. Regardless of where you are, you can do this. It can be indoors, it can be outdoors, it can be at work, it can be with family and friends in a restaurant. Just take it in. And what it does is it's an attitude shift. It's like, oh, okay, I may be frustrated because of what somebody just said to me. Okay, how can I pivot to something? What are 3 things around me that look beautiful? It's just a way of shifting your thinking away from the negative or stinking thinking. Spend time in nature on a regular basis to be reminded of the wonder of the universe. Pay attention to any possible ways to slow down and not get addicted to busyness. We live in a culture that really emphasizes being busy, that it's equated with being productive, being successful. But what we're really doing is we're stepping onto this treadmill that the speed keeps escalating. It keeps going up and up and up. It's very rare when somebody is into busyness that they stop and they pause and they say, do I really want to live this way? It just becomes routine for them. Take some time to give yourself gratitude for doing this deeper work. This is not easy work, to be more mindful, to be more present, to think about things that are on a spiritual plane. The mental component. Identify negative self-talk and self-deprecating thoughts. We all have this. The brain just goes around and it's like thoughts here, thoughts there, thoughts everywhere. Some of them are helpful, some of them are not, some of them are fact, some of them are not. And so just identify, how am I talking to myself? And check in to see if you're talking to yourself the way that you would talk to a loved one. 90% of the time, the answer is no. And this takes practice. It's doable. I've been working on it for decades. It's ongoing work. Deepak Chopra still needs to work on it. So nobody is above this task that needs to be done on a regular basis. Make a list of affirming thoughts, such as, I am worthy of good health, moving my body is lotion for my joints and a mood enhancer. Remind yourself that the way you eat is no one's business but your own. Leave as much as you can, learn as much as you can about food addiction and how it can cause a cycle of obsessive thinking. The emotional component. Identify the people who trigger you. Now, this is tricky. It can be people that you live with. It can be people that you work with. It can be people that are in your family of origin. It can be people that you love very, very much, but you're aware of the fact that you get a little triggered. It could be their energy. Their energy feels like it's wired. And so when you're around them, you get stressed. It could be historical events that have happened between the two of you that stir up a lot of uncomfortable feelings. Just identify the people that trigger you. It doesn't mean you can't be with them, but you'll be best served if you are prepared for the fact that when you spend time with them, they may drain energy and not give it to you. Avoid people pleasing at the expense of your needs and feelings. This is one of those things that is absolutely ongoing work. It's not like you arrive at this place and you do it perfectly here moving forward. That's not true for any of us. It's ongoing work, and it's checking in and saying, am I doing this because I want to? Am I doing this because I think I should? And am I doing it out of obligation and guilt if I don't do it? And no judgment about it. You can still choose to do it, but just be aware of when you're doing it so that it doesn't become automatic. Notice if you are isolating from others and what may be causing you to do so. I know that for me, when I was binging and overeating sugar products, I lived a double life. I ate one way in front of people, and then I ate another way when I was alone, and there was a stark contrast between the two. I would never eat sugary, gooey things in front of people, because if I started, I wanted to be able to keep going, and I didn't want to keep going in front of people. So it really, really caused a lot of isolation for me. And that, of course, contributed to the story that I was making up in my mind, that I was a really bad person, and that if anybody knew what I was doing, they would be so disgusted they couldn't love me. Thought replacements. I can't have that. You can replace that with, I choose not to eat that. Everyone else is eating this can be replaced with, that food doesn't work well in my body. I won't get to eat this for another year. There are delicious foods available all year to me. I remember this thing about everyone else is eating this. This was really common for me to come up against when I was first trying to avoid sugar. And I remember I was leaving a job, and they, as a going away party, they presented me with this enormous cake. So here are all these colleagues standing around looking at me with these big smiles, expecting that I would just be ecstatic that they were presenting me with this beautiful big cake. I took a deep breath. I said, okay, how do I want to handle this? And I said to them, this was so thoughtful. I am so grateful and appreciative that you did this kind gesture. I'm not eating sugar, but I want you all to have a piece and enjoy it. And it means everything in the world to me that you thought of this. So there are tactful ways of getting out of sticky situations. Okay, this one is a really, really good one to take a look at. Have some of this food. Now, we all know that the people behind saying this are usually well-intentioned. They want us to enjoy it. They feel like food is a way of showing love. And these are some sample things that you can say. No, thank you. I'm not eating blank this month. Now, I'm starting this list of possible reactions in ways that are going from maybe delicate to more assertive. So as we go down the list, they're going to be a little bit more of a pushback if somebody keeps haranguing you. No, thank you. I know you worked really hard to make it just for me, and I'm sure it's excellent, but I'm not ready to eat it right now. No, thank you. I gave it up for a detox cleanse, Lent, Passover last month, and it felt so good, I decided to keep going. No, thank you. I'm working with a nutritionist, and she wants me to stay off blank for right now. Blame it on the nutritionist. No, thank you. I love you dearly. You're my favorite aunt, uncle, cousin, but I'm not going to eat that right now. And then now we're starting to get a little bit more assertive. No, thank you. It was delicious, but I'm full. No, thank you. I've had enough. No, thank you. You're putting that on the wrong plate. I'm not eating it. No, thank you. Why is it so important to you that I eat this? What part of no, thank you did you not understand? It was delicious, but I'm full. I've had enough. You're putting that on the wrong plate. I'm not eating it. Why is it so important to you that I eat this? What part of no, thank you did you not understand? Okay, here is the most important antidote to sugar addiction, from my opinion, my personal and my professional opinion, and that is support. Left to our own devices, we get caught up in the stinking thinking and we perpetuate a behavior that is familiar to us. It can take up to 90 days to start a new habit, and leaving behind sugar, especially if your body is addicted to it, which many people are, is difficult on the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual level. So it's imperative that you identify where you can get some support. Some sources of this could be a 12-step program. There's Food Addicts Anonymous, there's Overeaters Anonymous. Some people find it even helpful if they're addicted to food to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, because they feel like the concepts there are about putting down the substance that you're powerless over, and you can use food interchangeably with alcohol. And there's a lot more AA meetings available to people than some of the others. An online support group. There are multiple opportunities for that. Chef AJ is famous for creating support systems for people. And obviously you are all aware of what she's offered and how invaluable that has been. A coach or a therapist, just somebody that you can turn to, a professional who may be able to guide you. Friends and family. Now, friends and family obviously also includes roommates, and the people that we live with can play a large role in our ability to recover from sugar addiction. We have to get them to understand, which means we have to start sharing our truth with them and let them know what it is that we're trying to do. And many people that I work with, they feel a lot of shame about their relationship to food, and so they keep it secretive. And this can happen with people's spouses. So they, when the spouse is watching TV or when the spouse has gone to bed, that's when they do their binging, or they do their binging when they're on the road driving and they hide all of the wrappers. There's a lot of shame. So I came up with this a presentation that I offer people, and I'll explain it to you a little bit more as we proceed. But what it is it's an hour-long presentation where I answer questions and I help people. How do I get support from my loved ones around my food and my weight issues? What are some of the things I can say? How do I start these conversations? What boundaries can I set? And at the same presentation, I'm also inviting people who have a loved one who has food and weight issues, who may not know how to support them. They may feel like everything they say is the wrong thing. They may feel like, should I mind my own business? Should I stay on top of them about what they're eating? So it's a difficult situation for both the people who are suffering, and it's also difficult for the people who love them, because they don't want to offend them. They don't want to pivot to something that's painful, but they also feel like they're seeing somebody harm themselves and they want to know how to be helpful. This comes up a lot when I'm working with couples where one person may be attempting to get on a healthier eating regime and losing weight. And the partner will say to me, on the one hand, they're saying, I don't want to eat that. I don't want to eat that. And then on the other hand, 2 days later, they're asking if I want to go out and get some ice cream with them. So they're receiving a lot of mixed messages, which obviously can be confusing. So in this presentation, I offer a lot of tips about how you can begin a conversation, initiate a conversation if you are the person who's suffering and looking for support, and how you can offer support if you love someone who is suffering. And this is the presentation. And Chef AJ, I believe you were kind enough to put a link in the show notes about this. It's Food, Feelings, and Family, a virtual presentation. And this is all very self-explanatory. And if you click on the link, you can see it also. But I just wanted to make sure that you understood that it's a non-judgmental opportunity for people who are either looking for support or people who want to give support, because so often it's a delicate matter. And I have a lot of tools and tips on how you can bridge that awkwardness and make it easier, especially with the people that you live with. You may have someone that you love that you're concerned about their weight, but you don't know how to bring it up. You may have someone that you love that you feel is sabotaging your attempts at eating healthier. So how do you manage these kinds of delicate situations? So there are 2 dates that are available. It's an hour each, and you can ask questions, you can be involved, you can just listen, whatever would work for you. Some people are more bashful than others, but I really love this presentation because I think that it's an opportunity for people to come up with some, how do I start this conversation in ways that they never thought of before? Okay, so here's us. I know that on your show, Chef AJ, oftentimes people will ask, what do you eat? What do you eat? So I just thought I would show you some pictures of a typical day for me. And then we can see if anybody has any questions that they want to ask. So a typical day for me is, it starts with breakfast. And as you can see, there's plenty of food there. And I love to eat a lot of food. And because I don't eat any junk and I don't have any sugar, and I personally don't have anything with flour in it, I'm able to consume a lot of food because it's whole food and my body digests it so well that I don't gain weight. Again, I've been sugar-free for 33 years and I lost 40 pounds, and it was not difficult. So there's a big bowl of oatmeal there with cinnamon on top. It's actually steel cut oats because I find steel cut oats just sustain me longer. They're more satiating. Then next to it on the bottom right is a big bowl of plain yogurt. I happen to make my own yogurt with soy milk. I have an Instant Pot that enables me to make it, and I just love it, 2 pieces. And on top of it, I put cinnamon, and that's a bunch of hemp seeds because I'm oftentimes needing to make sure that I get enough fat in my diet because I'm eating so healthy that I want to make sure that I don't lose too much weight. And then a big bowl of fruit. Now that happens to be cantaloupe and blueberries, but I change it out all the time, whatever is in season. And so that would be my breakfast. This would be a typical lunch. So what you see here is you see a large salad with a big dollop of hummus. I happen to make my own hummus because I love to cook, and I enjoy creating things from scratch, but obviously you can purchase it anywhere. And then those wedges of potatoes with air fried potatoes with spices on them. And the dressing is actually a tahini dressing that I make that I absolutely love. So that's the breakfast, that's the lunch. And then for dinner, I oftentimes will have a big bowl of soup. And those tortilla chips I made myself. I buy the corn flour, and then I bake them, and then I cut them up. So I really, really love to have that with my soup. That happens to be a vegetable bean soup. And what I do, I'm really into batch cooking because I just feel like it's more convenient that way. So in the summer, when I grow a ton of vegetables, we have a big vegetable garden. I grow a ton of vegetables, and then I make big, big pots of soup, and then I freeze them. So right now in my freezer, I have about 30 quarts of that soup right there. And it tastes so good, and I'm using the ingredients while they're fresh, the tortilla chips. And then that bowl over to the right is apples. They're kind of steamed because that helps my digestion. At my age, I find that my digestion of raw foods is a little bit challenged. And then on top of it, I have cinnamon. So that's it. That's what I eat. If anybody wants to reach out to me or learn more about my work, both individual work, coaching, counseling, here is my website. And I believe, again, Chef AJ, that you posted a link to it. And then underneath it is my email address. I'm really good about getting right back to people. I love to stay in touch with people. And so you can feel free to reach out to me there. I work with people virtually and I work with people live. I happen to be located in Maine, and that's not necessarily on the way to anything for most of your viewers, but that's where I am. And I also do virtual work with people all over the country. And I am going to stop the screen share. And here we are.
Wow, thank you, Sarah. That was great. There's a question from Kathy. She wants to know if you eat dates or date sugar or date paste or date syrup.
You know, I have had dates in the past 33 years. I don't necessarily, to be honest, dates are pretty sweet. And so for me, my palate has changed so much that a date is just too sweet. That's why I wanted to show you the food that I eat, because I have gotten to the point where fruit is sweet and yummy and it constitutes a dessert for me. If I'm making something like, I love your banana oat muffins, Chef AJ. I love those. And those, of course, are sweetened with apple sauce and banana. And I find that to be like a treat. I tend not to have a lot of baked goods just because it is something that my history is a little bit shaky on that, meaning that when I binged, I oftentimes binged on baked goods. So it's a combination of me not feeling the need for it, me feeling like, why introduce it if it's something, if I'm getting pleasure from other food and it's not necessary. But I have made those muffins, and where I found that helpful is if I needed to have something on the road, like if I'm going on a long drive, and I freeze them and then I take them, and I've got that wonderful breakfast that I enjoy, and it's so convenient. So I like to have that in the freezer just in case.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I see what you mean. And somebody's saying, so do you avoid dried fruit like raisins and things like
You
that?
know, they're safe for me. I can eat dried fruit, but like I said before, I love to eat volume. And so from a caloric point of view, I can have so many grapes in lieu of raisins. And I like to go for the volume. But you know, I've made these vegan stuffed winter squashes with golden raisin rice mix in them. It's absolutely delicious. It's not that I feel like I can't have it, but I just don't have it very often. Dried fruit, I don't see anything wrong with it. I really urge people to pay attention to the ingredients, because so often they have insidious things in there. uh, I mean, sugar, some form of sugar. And I'm really clear about the fact that I don't want to have any added sugar in my life other than fruit. And so I don't feel the need.
Yeah, absolutely. Some dried fruit has oil and sugar and salt in it. Yeah. So you really understand Dr. Barbara Rolls, where calorie density, you can have 2 cups of grapes or a quarter cup of raisins.
Exactly, exactly. And I love volume, and it's better because the it's satiating, and when it's in season, I try to eat my vegetables and my fruits that are in season. And when it's the season, I go blueberry picking and I freeze a whole bunch of quarts of it. So I'm fortunate in that I'm organized and I actually enjoy those kinds of things, but obviously you can go to any store and get blueberries that are frozen. So people don't need to be as involved as I am.
Yeah, great. Do you work generally with people one-on-one, or do you ever do any groups?
Oh, I do groups also. I do groups where I'm helping people to maybe identify what it is that's causing them to eat emotion, like what causes their emotional hunger, and how to distinguish between emotional and physical hunger. I've worked with people on all sorts of topics around either anxiety or depression. I'm really interested in integrating health and wellness with mental well-being, because I think that they're intricately linked. And I think that a lot of people could use tips for both. We live in a time right now where there's just so much mental confusion, and the mental health of the average person is really being challenged because of all of the anxiety and the upheaval in the world. And so I work with people around trying to moderate their stress levels, and also how do they calm their central nervous system. And it's imperative to me that I practice what I preach. When I was in the wacky world of binging and, just engaging behaviors that were high risk behaviors, uh, it was a whole other mindset, and my mental health um, was not improving as a result. My behaviors were directly related to my level of anxiety and depression. And when I did a deep dive into changing my diet and getting all of those foods out of my food plan, it also enabled me to have a calmer central nervous system, a calmer brain. And then I could, from there, start to get into some of the routines of yoga, of spending time out in nature. But when you're feeling frenetic, when you're running around trying to find where you can get your next drug fix of sugar, you're not thinking about anything beyond the immediate, how do I get through this minute? And in turn, you're not developing coping skills that are healthy, that can help you to be resilient against all of the trials and tribulations that life hits us with. We all get hit with curveballs, right? They're inevitable. And the way that we manage to get through those curveballs is directly related to our level of mental and physical well-being, I believe.
Wow, thank you. So Deanne wants to know, where exactly in Maine do you see in-person clients?
I'm right outside of Portland, Maine. My office is in Portland, Maine. I live right outside of it. I've been here for about 35 years, and grew up in Massachusetts, but I'm a transplant to Maine, and I really enjoy it. And then, of course, with COVID, I expanded my practice tremendously to include virtual presentations. And if people go to my website, there's also some free downloads that they can access around how to manage emotional triggers and anxiety and those kinds of things. So they're free to peruse my website if they want. But I just wanted to go back to also reference the virtual event that's coming up soon. There is a special pricing for it that I'm offering to your folks. And there are 2 different dates that it's available, and I tried to accommodate what I thought most people's schedules would require. And if anybody has any questions about either of those dates or the presentation itself, they can feel free to reach out to me.
Great, thanks. So here's a question from Deb. Do you think that agave or stevia are good substitutes for sugar, or no sweeteners at all is best? I actually think both of those are worse than sugar, personally.
I have not had good experience with sugar substitutes. What it does is it hits the part of my brain that gets all excited about sugar. Now, I haven't had any of these sugar substitutes for probably at least, 30 years. So I know that there's been many iterations. I've never tried stevia. There are some people who are able to have a little maple syrup or a little honey, even though they were addicted to refined sugar. I just feel like it's not something that I miss or I want. And that's the other thing is, what is your goal? Is your goal to be able to say that you're sugar free, or is your goal to be able to get your taste buds to the point where real food just brings you so much pleasure that you don't feel the need to accent it with artificial things? And again, this is a gradual process for people. It varies from person to person. But for me, I avoid sweeteners. The fruit is sweet enough for me. Beets actually are very, very sweet to me. And a sweet potato that's, the orange sweet potatoes are much too sweet for me. I prefer the Japanese, the purple sweet potatoes, because they're slightly more mild. So I hope that answers her question.
Great, thank you. Yep, I just think you just keep the desire for, sugar is sugar. So, Dr. Goldhammer is going to be on the show tomorrow, and he's going to say, just because something is less bad doesn't mean it's good.
Right. And I also wanted to say something, Chef AJ, to the folks who are feeling anxiety about this Halloween coming up. Okay. That I understand. I get it. We've all been there. It's not your fault that you feel a little bit, maybe like part of you really wants to binge on the sugar and the candy, and part of you is feeling like, I don't want to. The reason why I wanted to give this presentation today is because the holiday hasn't come yet. So you still have the opportunity to prepare yourself and your home so that you're not tempted in the way that you've been historically. And there's no shame in, making a mistake or whatnot, but ask yourself, is it worth it? That really helped me when I was trying to stop my binging behavior, is I got to the point where I said, is that food worth the way I'm going to feel afterward? Because inevitably, if I started, I couldn't stop. So not only did that mean that that day was going to be ruined because I was going to have a bloated food hangover, but the next day was going to be ruined too, because I was going to be feeling so much shame and frustration and defeat about having binged the day before. So it's like I'm just having my life go by, days at a time. It was a terrible cycle to be in. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And that's why I feel like support is essential, whether it be professional support or an online support group. The services that you provide, Chef AJ, are invaluable. The speakers that you bring, the community, the non-judgmentalism. I just love coming to your shows.
Well, thank you. So here's a comment from Chris. I'm feeling the dizziness, weird sensation set in, avoiding the sugar. I must be going through the same thing as those with drug addiction. Do you think there is a detox, a physical detox when people get off sugar?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's been scientifically found to be the case. So, all you need to do is do a little bit of research on food addiction and you will find. And if she wants to reach out to me, I can certainly recommend some books. I know that you have too, Chef AJ, that there are books that document with wonderful science, document the fact that sugar can be addictive and that eliminating it from your diet can produce withdrawal symptoms that are similar to that of other drugs. So it's not some kind of a myth. It's not something that people are just inventing. It's real. And it's also not necessarily talked about enough because there's so much weight shaming in our culture that our society is more inclined to attribute somebody's weight gain as being around they don't have willpower, as opposed to they're being fed substances that are not meant to be eaten, especially by people who are susceptible like that.
How does one know? I mean, how does one know if they're susceptible? Just based on the fact that they can't stop eating it, for example?
Yeah, I think that there's a difference, and it can be a subtle difference, but I think a person, if they really are honest with themselves, they know the difference between feeling like something brings them joy and enhances their life versus something brings them shame and they just feel powerless over it. And so some of the examples might be that you make up these rules in your head, like I'm not going to eat after 7 o'clock at night, or I'm only going to have 2 of those candy items. And then before you know it, the whole bag is being consumed. That's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you're a weak person. It's because your brain gets activated in such a way that it wants to enhance the way that it feels on an ongoing basis. And so the brain is saying, let's have more of this drug. Let's have more of this drug. So that's how I would respond to that.
Nice. Thank you. Jessie's saying she's searching for a toothpaste that's free of artificial sweeteners. Do you know of any?
I use Jason brand. And, she can just do some research around what are some natural toothpaste and then look at the ingredients. I also feel, I just feel like eating this way has prompted me to be more aware of all sorts of toxins that are in the environment. I have found it helpful personally. I enjoy making my own cleaning products. Again, I think there's a part of me that was probably reincarnated from the 1800s. I like doing things like making my own laundry detergent, making my own dishwasher detergent. And so that can be fun if somebody is inclined to do that kind of thing. But in terms of the toothpaste, you can do some research on this. I use Jason's and I find it really helpful. I don't know exactly what all the ingredients are in it, but I trust it and it doesn't trigger me at all.
Nice. So why is it that people don't understand that flour for many people that are susceptible to sugar addiction is just as deleterious?
Well, I think that again, I think that there are some forms of flour that some people are sensitive to and not others. So for example, if you take chickpeas and you grind them into a flour, if you take oats and you grind it into a flour, you can make a baked good, but it's not going to trigger you the way that it would if it were some other substance. There's a difference between what you make and what you purchase in the grocery store in terms of, remember, going back to that ingredient list that I had suggested that people start to acquaint themselves with, because there's so many ways in which sugars get disguised. So, that's something also. And then the psychological attachment that people have to baked goods and the memories. Remember, I said that so much of food is tied up with childhood memories and the nostalgia. Most children have baked goods that are not necessarily something that's made from whole foods. And so they start to develop this linkage between the baked good and then the comfort of their childhood memories, and then they want to duplicate it in their adulthood. But as adults, you can make it with healthy ingredients that are less triggering. The reason why I don't use flour is because it triggered me too much. Anything that had flour in it, I found myself just feeling like I went down this mental slippery slope. Now, having said that, I am able to have corn flour that I use to make my tortillas, but I know what's in the corn flour. It's just corn and some lime juice. It's so, again, if you get corn tortillas at the store, you want to make sure that you look at the ingredients. I know Trader Joe's sells corn tortillas that only have lime and corn in them. But if you go to a regular supermarket, you'll find that there's all sorts of other junk in there. And I just avoid it.
Yeah, good. There's a question. Do you eat popcorn?
I used to, and I didn't have a problem with it. I would love popcorn with some salt on it. And especially when I was nursing my two kids, I just found it was a very easy thing to eat while I was on the road and running around like a crazy person. The thing that got me to stop eating popcorn was actually that I'm such a dental phobic. I hate going to the dentist. And I found that I was risking breaking some of my fillings. And that was the deterrent. And I just said, no more popcorn. But I think that, again, if you look at the ingredient list, the problem with popcorn, my opinion, is that it's very easy to overeat it. And it's like it tastes good, you're eating it, and then before you know it, you don't realize how full you are. I remember there were times when I would eat popcorn. This was before I went off of sugar. There were times when I would eat popcorn that I was so full that I couldn't go out that night with friends. So you have to be careful because it expands and it can be very deceptive. But in terms of if somebody feels that they make their own popcorn so they know what's in it, and sometimes people want to measure. I think that when I started this program, when I took sugar out, I would have like a quarter of a cup of unpopped popcorn. And then that was kind of my serving size. I used to weigh and measure. I don't anymore. I had to in the beginning. Yeah, I had to in the beginning because I had no concept of what constitutes a serving size. And it was making me so crazy going back and forth between that's too much, that's too little, that I found it really helpful to have that fence and that guide of weighing and measuring, and I don't anymore. And so for some people, it can be a great way to head into the transition. For other people, it makes them feel more obsessive. So it's individual. And again, that's why I think it's important to work with somebody for support, because we have to distinguish between what's our mind telling us is okay because it wants to get away with overeating and what is actually fact around nutrition. So I have utilized nutritionists in the past, and I find them to be very helpful, nutritionists and dietitians. The other thing I just wanted to say is on my slides, the ones that said about no thank you and gave you possible responses, that was actually developed by Teresa Wright, and she is the founder of the Renaissance Nutrition Center, and she's worked with food addicts forever. and she's a very good resource. And if anybody wants to, they can email me, and I'll extend her information to her. But I know that you also have lots of people that you have on your show who are really knowledgeable, that can help people who are trying to break away from the sugar and whatnot.
Well, think about popcorn is calorie density. It's 1,800 calories per pound. There's no water in it. So it's, you don't get early satiety as if you were eating whole corn, which is 500 calories per pound. And it's also a hand to mouth food, which I don't recommend for people that struggle with weight.
And most people eat popcorn while they're watching TV. And so then they're in this hypnotic state, right? Where they don't even realize how much they're eating. Or in the movie theater, they don't realize how much they're eating. And then before they know it, it's gone. But I'll tell you, there's no better deterrent than not wanting to break a filling in your mouth and have to go to the dentist.
Oh yeah, a long time ago, I broke a crown on popcorn, $1,500. That's why I stopped eating it. The same thing, out of cheapness or not wanting to go to the dentist. So Sarah, for people that struggle with food addiction or sugar addiction specifically, do you think it's a good idea for them to be drinking alcohol?
I'm not a fan of alcohol, for many reasons. Number one is because it's so highly marketed to us that I think that many people are disconnected from what it was originally intended for. It was intended for years and years and years ago. It was intended to augment the taste of certain foods. And also, don't forget, alcohol was used to anesthetize people, in the days before they had anesthesia. So I personally, I don't consume alcohol. It's a very personal individual choice. It's not as though I want to judge other people if they do. For me, I'm not interested in changing my mind. What I mean by that is like changing the way that my mindset is, or altering my mind, because I happen to be really happy with my life and I abstain from substances. So it's not broken for me. So there's no reason to engage in alcohol. I don't like the taste. I don't like the way it makes me feel. And I'm not going to be succumb to something just because other people are doing it. But having said that, I try to pass no judgment, because I think we're all trying to get through the day, Chef AJ. We're all doing the best that we can. And for some of us, that looks like we're able to not have ingest anything artificial. For some of us, it means that we just cut out meat and dairy. It's really imperative that we support one another and not judge one another.
Right. But not so much as a judgment, but alcohol is not a health food that it's being touted as, number one. And if you're struggling with sugar, to me, I mean, if people want to drink, of course they have the right, but then if they're still having sugar cravings, don't you think it's a good idea at least to try abstinence from alcohol as well, to see if it dials it down for people?
Absolutely, because it does contain sugar, and it distills down to sugar. I don't know if your listeners know this, but tobacco leaves were soaked in sugar. And so there's all sorts of ways in which it infiltrates our lives. In terms of my gripe about alcohol, to be honest, my primary gripe is the way that it's marketed to young men, the way that it's associated with masculinity, toughness. If you watch football games, you got to drink beer. I find that to be so appalling. And so as angry as I am at the food industry, I think I'm more angry at the alcohol industry.
Yeah. So Vi says, my young grandkids will trick or treat. How do you allow kids to trick or treat and not allow them to eat the candy? It's confusing to them.
Well, I've heard different things. What I always did is I bought my kids candy from them. So what they would do is they'd come home with all this candy, and I'd say, I'll pay you to get the candy. And then I would just donate it somewhere. But that was me. And there are families that decide that they have a limited number of pieces that the child can keep. And then beyond that, the rest gets chucked so that the child can pick out, the 10 favorite pieces or that kind of thing. But I see so many families get into this cycle of like arguing and fights. And the bottom line is that most kids who get their candy, at Halloween, they come home, they eat a bunch of it at night, and then everybody's stressed out because they're not going to sleep because they're so wired. I mean, it's just a ridiculous holiday in that regard. Children don't need it. There's lots of ways of celebrating childhood without it being candy laden. But what I always did is I just purchased the candy from my kids, and then I would intersperse that with some years I'd say, okay, you can have 10 pieces, pick out what you want, and the rest gets donated. So we negotiated it. I also would hand out sugar-free gum. Not that that's a healthy food, but it felt to me a little bit better than some of the options. I also was known to hand out little boxes of raisins. And, you know, my kids would roll their eyes, but I just felt really hypocritical knowing what I know and then continuing to give junk out to children. It defied any kind of logic for me.
I know. That's why I'm just turning out the lights and going to the movies. Like, if I get egged, I get egged, because I can't contribute to the delinquency and the future addiction of a minor.
That's right. And the other thing is, like, for Halloween, I mean, not for Halloween, for Valentine's Day, when my kids were growing up, what I would do, and instead of getting, you know, candy, what I would do is I would get things that were red, like strawberries and watermelon. And I would make this beautiful salad with those things. And that's how I would celebrate the redness of Valentine's Day, as opposed to, you know, the dipped chocolates and all the candy and the junk. And, you know, I'd get them maybe a little toy or something. So there's ways of celebrating and bringing joy to your children without necessarily having it be around candy. Now, the other thing that I am going to be talking about with at my virtual presentation about how to get support and give support to people who are struggling with food and weight is, how do you manage the holidays? What's a good way for everybody to negotiate that? Because, as you said, there's oftentimes candy that is left over. And if candy and sugar are a drug for some people, then it's essential that they let their loved ones, the people that they live with, know that it's not safe for them to have it in the house.
Yeah, it's just, unfortunately, a lot of people don't get support. They don't get taken seriously for this addiction.
Well, I think that I agree. And I think that that's hopefully changing. A lot of your guests are real advocates for making sure that the science lines up with the statements. And they're really promoting the whole notion of what is real, what is true, as opposed to what the message is that we've been fed all these years. So there's movement forward, but I agree with you that it's skewed, and that it's really, it's unfortunate, and that we have a ways to go.
Mary says, I don't get a lot of kids anymore since my children have grown up. So instead of buying candy, I give the trick-or-treaters $1. What's your address? I'll be there 100 times tomorrow. No, just kidding.
That's great.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think it's a ridiculous holiday, and I think it should be banned. I mean, you know, especially, I don't know if you've read Dr. Joel Fuhrman's book, Fast Food Genocide or Disease Proof Your Child. It's
Well, and the other thing is, I mean, as long as we're on the subject, I think it's also ridiculous New Year's Eve, right? Everybody goes out and gets drunk. I mean, what's that about? But you and I are a minority, Chef AJ. We really are.
Well, remember what William Jennings Bryan said: never be afraid to be in the minority. When the minority is right, for one day they will be the majority.
Exactly.
So,
and be true to yourself. That's also a motto that I try to live by.
Yeah, well, you're great. I really enjoy when you come on the show, Sarah.
Thank you, Chef AJ. It's a pleasure. And I just, again, if any of your guests have any questions, they want to reach out to me, they can email me. Hopefully some of them will inquire about my presentation so that they get the support or are able to give the support that they deserve.
Well, not only was it a wonderful presentation, but it was a timely one. Gina's saying, how about lotto tickets? But then we don't want to, you know, if they've got a sugar addiction, maybe they got a gambling one too, you know?
That same region of the brain, right?
Yeah. Nothing that, you know, that's what I say. I loved your idea, though. I'm going to tell Dr. Goldhammer tomorrow. Somebody needs to write a pleasure trap for kids.
That's right. That's right. And and they can teach us instead of us adults thinking that we know everything.
You know, I was thinking, Dr. Goldhammer's a guest on the show tomorrow, and he's actually going to be showing us how he makes dinner for his family. And so we're having the show a little bit later at 4:00. And I remember his wife, Dr. Jennifer Morano, who co-founded the True North Health Center with him. They have a child who, Gar, gosh, he's in his 30s now. I don't know his exact age, but he grew up eating the way we eat now. He never had bread or maple syrup.
Rare.
He was vegan, but he also didn't have sugar or flour or alcohol or, coffee, those kind of things. And Dr. Morano told me that when Gar was a little boy, I don't remember how little, but they had gone to some party and there were cupcakes, and he had never seen a cupcake before because they just didn't have them at his house. And he was told that if he was a good boy, he'd get Brussels sprouts. And so they're his favorite food. And so she said that, he went over to wherever and he brought this cupcake over and said, Mommy, can I have this? And so instead of saying like no or yes, she basically kind of sat him down and talked to him like an adult and said, yeah, you can have it, but I just want you to explain why she really said, like, we don't eat these things because they're, when you eat them, you're going to want it more. And they're very, I don't know her exact words, but the point was, she treated him like an adult, even though he was a child, and he looked at it and he just put it back,
Yeah, and it's the truth, right? The truth is that these substances are not healthy for one's body, and it's not real food. Most of it is not real food, and so they were being consistently truthful with him. They also were fortunate in that they both had the same philosophy, and many couples, they're split on that. One person feels like the other person's being too, quote, rigid, and so that's something that couples have to negotiate, especially when they're raising children.
Chrissy, who's watching live, says, as a child, I never saw sugar until I was 13 and I had to ask what it was. And, we didn't even talk about caffeine, because caffeine, you talk about how alcohol is marketed towards men. Well, Red Bull is marketed towards children, and and not only has one addictive substance, sugar, but the caffeine, and then together. And I remember interviewing Dr. Michael Gorin from USC, a pediatric obesity specialist. And, that's not good for a young kid either, to have sugar and caffeine.
No, of course. And we can go down that road, and just, you and I both agree about that whole marketing shenanigan. And it's just not in the best interest of the children. And it's definitely something that people want to pursue for their own profit.
And you think about it, if kids weren't already little sugar addicts, which is the name of a wonderful book by Nancy Appleton, who I interviewed once, it wouldn't be such a big deal, the Halloween. But it's not like these kids are whole food plant-based eaters that aren't eating sugar. They're probably eating sugar all the time. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like they eat like us and then on this special day they have to go have sugar.
Well, and the thing is, you just hit something. What's so special about those foods? Like, why does celebration have to be linked with junky eating?
Or why does celebration have to be linked with cake and alcohol all the time? I mean, I don't, that's a question that I don't know who's going to be able to answer that. Other countries, when I think about the United States, I remember when I went to college and, in high school, and I'm like 63. So I went to high school like 45 years ago or so. I remember even in high school, graduated in 1977, if you even had gum, like you would get in trouble. You'd either, this was, and then I got to college, and it's like, you could just have a buffet at your desk, like they didn't care. Like you could bring in, you could eat it. And I'm thinking, this is kind of weird. Like, cause for 18, I graduated early because I skipped, but for 17 years, you couldn't have, even a water bottle. And now we're at this institution of learning, and you could just do whatever you want at your desk, and in other countries, it's not like that, where people eat at business meetings and things like that. We're a really, an overeating culture, aren't we?
We're an overeating culture, and we also are, we really, really are so addicted to the fads. So we just flip from thing to thing to thing. And that's another reason why I think we need to be honest with ourselves about, is the way I'm living my life working for me or not? And then find people that are of like mind.
Yeah,
they're out there.
It's very hard because, sugar in general, specifically sugar and processed food, they're kind of the same thing, full of sugar, fat, and salt. They're everywhere. They're at the pet store. They're at Joann's Fabrics. They're in the parking lot of the hospital. You really can't get away from them. They're socially acceptable. They're easily available. They're very affordable, and pretty much everybody's doing it. I love how Dr. Frank Sabatino says, food addiction is the only addiction you can just do in the light of day in front of everybody, because everybody else is doing it.
And you know what else? I think this is kind of a cynical thing to say, but I think that a lot of adults live vicariously through children by pushing the candy on the children, because it's like they feel some shame about eating it themselves. So they feel like, here, have some more cake, have a cupcake, have an ice cream cone. And really, if they could be honest with themselves that it's not good for the kids and they don't need to have it either, then they can stop equating it with, again, being special and celebratory.
And people, until they actually get off sugar for a discernible time, and congratulations to the viewer that's off it for 5 weeks, but until you're off it for a while, you can't realize how sweet life is without sugar.
For sure, for sure. I mean, I go to functions now and I get to interact with people instead of obsessing about how can I get to that table more quickly? How can I hide the food? How can I make sure that I get more of that before they take the plate away? It's just this whole insane spiral that I would go down. And now I can enjoy the people and the event, and the food is secondary.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was talking to my friend, Dr. Doug Lyle, who's a frequent guest on this show yesterday.
I know he is. I love him.
Yeah, I love him. And so I was talking to him because, for the first 43 years of my life, that's all I ate is sugar, pretty much. And I was telling him, I said, before I knew you, I was drinking, a Coke Slurpee for breakfast and a Dr. Pepper for lunch. And about 1,000 calories of my day came from sugar and caffeine. And I still eat desserts, Chef AJ desserts. They're very low in fat. And I don't eat, and they're basically oats and fruit, they're not even if they have dates, they're not very many. It's like mostly like
not
you
the
see
main ingredient.
Yeah. So for me, they're super sweet. For regular people, probably not sweet enough. However, I was telling him, I said, I like them, I eat them, but like if you give me a choice now, I'd rather have savory food. I would rather have savory food,
The taste buds have changed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not that I dislike them or don't eat them, but if I'm hungry, I would much rather have a second serving of whatever was the entree and skip dessert than have the dessert.
And you know what, Chef AJ, truth be told, you have a lot of joy and happiness in your life that is nourishing you. Okay, it seems like you've got a life that really works for you. I'm sure it's not perfect because none of us are, but you're doing something that you're passionate about. You get to work with really cool people. You're learning all the time. You're living in an environment that you seem comfortable in. And so life is good. So you don't necessarily rely on food to medicate you in any way because you feel like you've created a life that works for you.
Yeah. I also think exercise, we didn't talk about that, but I think for people that have this addiction, that can be one of the most helpful things, is to starting their day instead of with sugar and caffeine, with some kind of movement.
Well, and that's why I said in my physical tips about, look at movement as being lotion, motion is lotion for your joints, because it doesn't need to be that that it looks a certain way. I think getting up and moving your body, there's an expression that they have in AA, move a muscle, change a thought. And the implication, of course, is that just get up and move your body and something will shift up here. Because when we're just sitting and we're like getting obsessive in our head, that's when we go down this rabbit hole that's not helpful for anybody. But if we get up and we move around a little bit, we start to get distracted by everything that's going on around us. And plus, it feels good. We're getting our brain shifted into a different place.
Yeah, absolutely. So, question from Chris. Did you mention what your favorite book was for people that are challenged with sugar addiction?
I really love, there's an old book by Kay Shepherd about food addiction. But
Is it The Body Knows? Was it The Body Knows?
No, it's not The Body Knows. Is that the name of it? I think it's literally food addiction. It might be Food Addiction, The Body Knows, but that was an old, that's like decades old. In terms of what, I mean, I really like the Pleasure Trap because I think that it explains things in ways that are helpful. I personally don't read a lot. I get much more from watching, presentations like the ones that you have and listening, and then I take in the information in a whole other way. So for me, I find the resources online to be more helpful than books. And again, I think it starts with the food. I think the food is the first thing that you start with. You change the food and everything else just kind of comes along. But if you start to try to get more willpower, you start to think, oh, I have to love myself more. I think that that's great and that's important. We can all afford to do that, but you got to get these substances out of your system. So whatever it takes to make that happen. And I would encourage people not to try to do it alone. It's just too hard.
Right. I looked him up in 2 books, Food Addiction, The Body Knows, and From the First Bite. So, and I actually had a session with her many years ago when I first found out about food addiction. And I think her work is great and she's great. She knows, she's the one that has the saying, 1 bite is too many, 1,000 bites is never enough.
Exactly. And that's a classic. Now, I will say that there are other people who have written books, I don't necessarily need to name them, but who espouse the attitude of, eat what you want and it will all work itself out.
No, that's, listen,
Suicide for me.
the only thing I've ever heard that actually works for an addiction is abstinence. And I know some people say harm reduction. You can try harm reduction and eating less sugar. And if you're happy with your health and your results, then do it. But I've never, addiction, abstinence is hard for people. That's probably why they don't do it, but it never didn't work for an addiction.
I feel so blessed and so happy with my life that I'm not doing those insane behaviors anymore. I can't tell you. I mean, I did it all. I stole food. I took food out of the garbage. I'd eat frozen food because I was in the middle of a binge and I just needed to get something in my mouth. It's just hell. It's absolute hell. And so I'm much happier now with my life and the food is delicious. And there are people out there that are there to support others. So nobody has to do this alone.
Yeah. The one thing about Kay Shepherd is she's really a fan of dairy. And even a lot of the newer people like Dr. Joan Iflin recognizes that dairy is also an addictive substance because of the casomorphines.
I love Bitten. I love her work, Bitten Johnson.
I've heard of her. Nice. Yeah. Well, the only thing I'm going to be honest, she has said on record that you can't be vegan and overcome food addiction. She has said that because you can't heal the neurotransmitters without animal protein. And I then immediately had Dr. Greger and many of the other doctors on the show that said that was absolute nonsense. So I don't dislike her, but I dislike the saying that she believes that that's true.
Yeah, it doesn't happen to be something that I agree with, but again, you have to pick and choose the information that you get that resonates with you.
Absolutely. Anyway, this has been a wonderful conversation and very timely. If people watch it before Monday, maybe they won't go out and buy the stuff in the first place.
Exactly. And it's crap and nobody needs it in their system.
It's interesting, Sarah, because then the day after Halloween, if you're going to let's say Target or Walmart, maybe you just need a toothbrush or something, then all the crap is discounted to the most unbelievable low price, the Halloween crap,
Which is really dangerous for food addicts, right? It's very dangerous because then they get their drug for half price. So Absolutely. Be careful. Don't go shopping the week after.
Don't go shopping the day after Halloween. Stay out of the stores. Get your groceries delivered and have a happy Halloween.
That's right.
All right. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Oh, same here. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Remember, the show tomorrow is later at 4 p.m. Pacific time because Dr. Goldhammer is going to be showing us how he makes dinner. Take care, everyone.